Ambassador Hyan Wu walked into the massive crystal hall where alien representatives from across the galaxy gathered. His face looked tired and worried as he carried terrible news from a distant world. The hall was huge, with ceilings so high you could barely see the top. Walls made of some kind of glowing crystal that made everything look blue. The Zilani people were dying. These gentle plant-eating aliens had never hurt anyone in their entire history. They lived on peaceful farms, grew beautiful flowers, and spent their days creating art and music. But now the Korthok Empire had found them. The Korthoks were the worst kind of aliens you could imagine. They conquered worlds, enslaved entire populations, and destroyed anything beautiful just because they could. "Honored council members," Hyan Wu said, his voice carrying across the silent hall, "the Zilani are begging for help. Right now, Korthok warships are bombing their cities. Millions of innocent families are hiding in underground shelters, waiting to die." He paused and looked around the room. The Zilani have no weapons, no army, no way to fight back. In 3 weeks, maybe less, they will all be dead or in chains. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some had tentacles that wiggled when they were nervous. Others had multiple eyes that blinked at different times. But they all looked scared. Council Speaker Vexstar was a tall, thin alien with purple skin and tentacles instead of arms. Those tentacles were moving like crazy now. "This is very bad news, Ambassador Hyan Wu. But most of our member worlds are peaceful. We have trading ships, not warships. Maybe we could send food and medical supplies instead." An uncomfortable silence filled the hall. Everyone knew that wouldn't help. You can't stop bombs with bandages. Then Counselor Thresh spoke up from the back of the room where the lighting was dim. Thresh was scary-looking, even by alien standards, covered in black. Scales with glowing red eyes. There might be one option: the humans from Earth. The entire hall went quiet. Even the usual humming and beeping of alien technology seemed to stop. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, Thresh continued slowly. The most dangerous planet anyone has ever found. The fact that humans survived there at all means they know how to fight. Other aliens started whispering to each other in dozens of different languages. Earth's reputation was well known throughout the galaxy. It was a world of constant danger, deadly weather, poisonous animals, diseases that could kill you in hours, and natural disasters that happened regularly. Most aliens couldn't survive on Earth for even a day. Vexstar's tentacles were practically dancing with nervousness now. But humans are so new to the Council. They joined less than 5 years ago. Do we really know anything about them? We know? They're alive, Thresh said simply. On a planet that should have killed them millions of times over. The debate went on for hours. Some aliens worried that asking humans for help might be dangerous. Others pointed out that the Zilani would be extinct soon if nobody helped them. Finally, they took a vote. "Very well," Vexstar announced. "We will send a request to Earth asking for reasonable military assistance." Hyan Wu nodded and prepared the message. It was simple and polite, asking if humanity could possibly spare a few ships to help protect innocent lives. As he sent the message, Vexstar looked relieved. "I'm sure they'll send something small and manageable. Maybe a dozen ships for a peacekeeping mission." The other council members agreed. How much help could one planet really provide? None of them understood what they had just done. They were about to learn that when you ask humans for help, you better be ready for everything that comes with it, Captain. Minho was enjoying his morning coffee in the command center of the Soul's Pride when the message arrived. The ship was humanity's main diplomatic vessel, built to look peaceful and friendly when meeting alien species. It had comfortable meeting rooms, translation equipment, and even a small garden where nervous aliens could relax. Minho was a veteran of Earth's space program, with graying hair and calm eyes that had seen many first contacts with alien species. He prided himself on staying cool under pressure. But as he read the message from the Galactic Council, his coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "Genocide in progress," he muttered, reading the words again. The message was polite and formal, asking for reasonable military assistance to help protect the Zilani people. But between the diplomatic language, Minho could see the truth. An entire species was about to be wiped out. He set down his coffee and immediately sent the message to Earth Command. His note was short and direct. Genocide. In progress, recommend immediate response. Then he sat back and waited. He knew what was coming next. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath Seoul, alarms started buzzing within minutes. Admiral Ji Young was pulled out of a strategy meeting and handed the message. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She read the message once, then looked up at her staff. Get me the Defense Council. It's now. Within 2 hours, the most powerful people on Earth were gathered in the secure conference room. Defense Minister Taiman looked tired. He'd been dealing with budget meetings all day. Foreign Minister Su Jin had been dragged out of trade negotiations. General Kyung-ho still had mud on his boots from inspecting training exercises. Admiral Ji Young didn't waste time on pleasantries. She activated the main screen and showed them photos of the Zalani homeworld, beautiful cities with crystal towers, peaceful farms stretching to the horizon, and families of gentle plant-eating aliens living in harmony. Now the Zalani are completely defenseless, she said. No military, no weapons, no way to protect themselves. The Korthok Empire is going to kill every last one of them unless we stop it. Defense Minister Taiman leaned forward. What's our response time? How long do we have? Based on Korthok expansion patterns, maybe 2 weeks before they finish the job, Admiral Gill replied. But we need to move now. How many ships do you need, Admiral? Taiman asked. Admiral Ji Young looked around the room at each face. These were people who understood that sometimes you had to make hard choices. All of them. The room went quiet for a moment. General Kung-ho whistled softly. The entire fleet? It's never been done before. We've never faced a situation like this before, Admiral Ji Young said firmly. This isn't a border dispute or a trade disagreement. This is genocide, and humanity doesn't negotiate with genocidal maniacs. Defense Minister Taiman nodded slowly. Operation Shield Wall is authorized. Full fleet deployment. Back on the Souls. Pride Captain Minho received his orders. He was to send a simple reply to the Galactic Council. Humanity will provide appropriate assistance. Our forces are en route. Minho smiled as he sent the message. The aliens had asked for help, and they were going to get it. They'd probably expected a small peacekeeping force, maybe 50 ships at most. In human terms, meant bringing enough firepower to end the threat completely across Earth's military bases. Space docks and orbital stations, thousands of personnel, began the largest mobilization in human history. Every warship, every transport, every support vessel was being prepared for immediate deployment. The Galactic Council would soon learn that when humans promise to help, they don't do it halfway. 3 days after the human response, something strange started happening across the galaxy. Every major space station, every planetary defense system, every long-range sensor array began picking up the same impossible readings. Massive energy signatures were moving through hyperspace at incredible speed. On the Altarian monitoring station near the galaxy's edge, sensor operator Zixtel stared at his screens in disbelief. This can't be right, he muttered, running the scans again. The readings showed hundreds of large objects moving in perfect formation through hyperspace. Each one was giving off energy signatures bigger than most species' capital ships. Similar. Reports were flooding in from across Council space. The Montari Deep Space Observatory detected the fleet first, followed by sensors on 17 different worlds. Everyone was seeing the same thing, the largest fleet movement in recorded galactic history. Counselor Thresh was in his private office when the emergency reports started arriving. His scaled hands shook as he read them. The humans weren't sending a small peacekeeping force. They were bringing what looked like an invasion fleet. He immediately contacted Ambassador Hyan Wu, his voice tight with worry. Ambassador, our sensors are detecting an enormous fleet heading towards Alani space. There must be some kind of mistake. Are your people having technical problems with their ships? Hyan Wu was having lunch in the diplomatic quarters when the call came through. He calmly set down his chopsticks and checked his tablet, scrolling through the fleet deployment orders. No technical problems, Counselor Thresh. That would be Admiral Sung-ho's reconnaissance force. They're going ahead to assess the situation before the main fleet arrives. The silence on the communication line lasted so long that Hyan Wu wondered if the connection had failed. Finally, Thresh found his voice. Reconnaissance force. Ambassador, our sensors show over 300 vessels. Yes, that sounds about right for a reconnaissance mission, Hyan Wu replied, taking another bite of his lunch within minutes. Council Speaker Vexstar was calling an emergency session. His tentacles were moving so frantically they looked like they might tie themselves in knots. Ambassador Hyan Wu, you said reconnaissance force? But if that's just your scouts, then how big is your main fleet? Hyan Wu considered the question carefully. He could see the panic in the alien faces around him. These species thought in terms of small conflicts, limited engagements, and minimal force. They sent a dozen ships and called it a fleet. They couldn't understand how humans approached warfare or sending adequate numbers for the mission. Council Speaker Hyan Wu said simply, "But what does that mean?" Vexter's voice was getting higher and more strained. 50 ships? 100? 200? Hyan Wu looked at his tablet again, scrolling through pages of deployment orders. Every military base on Earth was emptying out. Every ship capable of hyperspace travel was being loaded with supplies and personnel. The orbital shipyards were working around the clock to prepare vessels that hadn't seen combat in years. Adequate, he repeated. What the council members couldn't understand was that humans and aliens measured adequate very differently. When the Altarians faced a threat, they sent enough ships to maybe win if everything went perfectly. When the Montari dealt with pirates, they sent just enough force to drive them away temporarily. But humans had learned hard lessons throughout their history. They'd learned what happened when you didn't finish the job completely. They'd seen evil returned stronger when it wasn't totally defeated. So when humans decided to help, they didn't send enough ships to maybe win. They sent enough ships to ensure the enemy could never threaten anyone again. The Korthok Empire had been terrorizing the galaxy for centuries. They'd enslaved dozens of species and destroyed countless worlds. To the Council, this was just how things were. A terrible but unchangeable fact of galactic life. To humanity, was a problem that needed solving permanently across Earth's military installations. The largest fleet in human history was preparing to launch, and this was just the beginning. Fleet Commander Zulahan was having a great day. From the command deck of his massive warship, the Bone Crusher, he could see the beautiful blue and green planet below. Zilani Prime was almost completely conquered. Now, his forces had been bombing the major cities for weeks, and the pathetic plant eaters were hiding in whatever holes they could find. Zulahan was a typical Korthok, 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray skin-like armor, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had been conquering worlds for over 300 years, and they were very good at it. They enjoyed causing pain and fear. To them, war wasn't just about winning territory. It was about breaking the spirits of everyone they defeated. He was planning which cities to destroy next when his sensor operator called out, "Commander! Multiple hyperspace exits detected." Zulahan turned to look at the tactical display, and his mood got even better. 300 ships had just appeared. Near the edge of the system, it looked different from normal council vessels, sleeker, more military in design. But 300 ships was nothing compared to his force of nearly 1,000 warships. Finally, he growled with satisfaction. The council has sent someone to play with us. His communications officer, a nervous younger Korthok named Volter, looked up from his station. "Sir, they're trying to contact us." "Put them through," Zulahan ordered. "I want to hear them beg." The main screen flickered to life, and Zulahan found himself looking at something he'd never seen before. The alien on the screen looked almost like a Korthok, but smaller and without claws or armor-like skin. It had strange hair on top of its head and wore some kind of uniform. "Unknown vessels," Zulahan broadcast in his most threatening voice. "You are trespassing in Korthok territorial space. This system now belongs to the Empire. Surrender immediately, or we will blast you into space dust." On the bridge of the UES Enchan, Admiral Sung Ho listened to the translation with a calm expression. He was a quiet man who preferred thinking to talking, but when he did speak, people listened. He'd spent 30 years in Earth's Navy, fighting pirates and protecting merchant ships. He'd seen bullies before. "Sir," his tactical officer, Commander So-young, said softly. "Their formation suggests they have about 900 ships. We're outnumbered 3-1, nodded without, taking his eyes off the enemy fleet. Open a channel to the Korthok commander." The communication went both ways now. Zulahan could see this small, soft-looking creature on his screen. He expected to see fear, maybe desperation. Instead, the human's dark eyes were completely calm. "Psst. Forces," Sung-ho said in a quiet, steady voice. "This is Admiral Sung-ho of the United Earth Navy. You have 10 minutes to withdraw all ships from Zalani space and release any captives you've taken. This is your only warning." For a moment, Zulahan was so surprised he couldn't speak. Then he started laughing, a horrible sound like grinding metal. His bridge crew joined in, filling the command deck with cruel laughter.
"How you dare threaten this?"
"Mighty Korthok Empire," Zulahan roared. "Little creature. We have conquered over 100 worlds. We've destroyed species that were fighting wars before your planet even had life on it. Who do you think you are?" Admiral Sung-ho checked the timer on his command display. 9 minutes, 50 seconds remaining. Zulahan's laughter died. There was something in the human's voice, a certainty, a coldness that reminded him of deep. "Space, you cannot be serious. You're outnumbered 3-1. 9 minutes, 40 seconds, Sunjo replied. Commander So-young looked at her admiral with concern. "Sir, should I prepare defensive positions?" "No," Sunjo said quietly. "Prepare. For offensive operations, all ships, battle stations." The countdown had begun, and the Korthok Empire was about to learn that humans didn't make threats. They made promises. When the 10-minute deadline ended, Zulahan was still chuckling to himself. These strange little creatures had no idea what they were facing. The Korthok Empire had perfected the art of warfare over centuries. Their ships were built like flying fortresses, covered in thick armor plating that could withstand massive punishment. Their weapons could crack planets. "All ships," Zulahan broadcast to his fleet. "Attack formation. Let's show these newcomers how the Empire deals with insects." Nearly 1,000 Korthok warships moved forward in a massive wave. Each ship was roughly the size of a city block, bristling with weapon ports and missile tubes. The sight had terrified countless species across the galaxy. To Zulahan, this was just another easy victory to add to his record. "Fire all weapons," he commanded. The space around Zalani Prime lit up like a deadly fireworks show. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the human formation, followed by massive energy beams that could melt through solid rock. Zulahan leaned forward in his command chair, eager to see the human ships explode into beautiful clouds of debris, but something was wrong. The missiles struck the human ships. But instead of explosions, there were just brief flashes of blue light. The energy beams hit their targets and simply ... disappeared. The human vessels sat there calmly, completely undamaged. "What?" Zulahan snarled. "How are their shields so strong?" On the bridge of the UES Incheon, Admiral Sung-ho watched the enemy. Attack with professional interest. Commander So-young monitored the shield readouts from her station. "Shield strength at 96% across the fleet, Admiral," she reported. "Their weapons are about 50 years behind our technology." Sung-ho nodded. "Return fire. Let's end this quickly." What happened next changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, and their weapons were unlike anything the Korthok had ever seen. Instead of crude missiles or simple energy beams, coherent, particle streams lanced out with surgical precision. The first volley cut through the Korthok formation like hot knives through butter. Ships that had survived battles against dozens of species were sliced in half. Armor that had protected them for decades simply evaporated under the focused energy assault. "Impossible," Zulahan screamed as he watched his ships dying. "Our armor is the strongest in the galaxy?" His tactical officer, Volter, was frantically trying to understand what was happening. "Commander, their weapons are operating on principles we don't understand. It's like they're not just hitting our armor. They're breaking apart the molecules that hold it together." Slaughter continued for 2 hours. The Korthok fought desperately, using every trick they'd learned from centuries of warfare. Nothing worked. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons never missing their targets. It wasn't just superior technology, it was superior strategy, superior training, and superior execution. By the end of the second hour, over 500 Korthok warships had been destroyed. The survivors began retreating in panic, sending frantic messages across their communication networks. "Don't engage the humans," Zulahan broadcast as his damaged ship limped toward hyperspace. "They fight like machines. They treat war like mathematics." On Zalani Prime, President Yelani had watched the entire battle from her underground command bunker. She was a small, flower-like alien with gentle eyes that had seen too much suffering in recent weeks. As the last Korthok ships disappeared into hyperspace, she began crying with relief. "Commander Soyoung," she transmitted to the human fleet, her voice shaking with emotion. "How can we ever thank you? You've saved our entire species." Commander Soyoung's calm voice came back immediately. "No thanks necessary, President Yelani. We were happy to help, but surely this is over now. The Korthok have been driven away?" There was a pause. Then Soyoung replied in the same calm tone, "Ma'am, we're just getting started. The real fleet is still on its way." Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had arrived. And they weren't here to play games. 2 days after the battle, President Yelani was finally starting to feel safe. The human reconnaissance fleet was patrolling Zalani's space, and, for the first time in months, her people were coming out of their underground shelters. Children were playing in the streets again. Farmers were checking their damaged crops. Then the sky started lighting up at first. It looked like shooting stars, dozens of bright flashes appearing in the darkness of space. But the flashes kept coming, faster and faster, until the night sky was filled with constant flickers of light. Each flash meant another ship emerging from hyperspace. President Yelani rushed to her command center and stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. "How many ships are arriving?" she asked her science advisor. "We've counted over 2,000 so far, Madame President," the advisor replied nervously. "And they're still coming." The ships that emerged were massive beyond anything the Zalani had ever seen. The reconnaissance fleet had been impressive, but these new vessels were floating cities. Some were longer than their capital city was wide. Others looked like mobile factories, bristling with construction equipment and supply depots. On the bridge of the flagship USS Busan, Admiral Gyeong watched her fleet settle into formation around Zalani Prime. She was a small, determined woman who had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, the day when humanity would have to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. "Fleet status report," she ordered. Her operations officer, Commander Hajian, consulted his displays. 3,000 ships now in system, Admiral.
Battle groups.
Wall battle groups ready for operations. Mobile repair stations are establishing orbital positions. Supply convoys are beginning resource distribution. Admiral Ji Young nodded with satisfaction. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a complete logistical undertaking that would allow her forces to operate far from Earth for months, if necessary. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown. Emergency sessions were being called every few hours as more reports came in about the human fleet's size. Council Speaker Ekstar's tentacles were wrapped around his desk so tightly they were starting to turn purple. "Ambassador Huyanwu," he said, his voice shaking. "Our sensors are showing over 3,000 human warships in Zalani space. This isn't a rescue mission. This is a full invasion force." Ambassador Huyanwu sat calmly in his chair, sipping tea from a small ceramic cup. Council Speaker Admiral Gyeong is simply ensuring that the Korthok threat is permanently eliminated. "We take the protection of innocent life very seriously, but 3,000 ships?" Councillor Thresh interrupted. "From across the chamber, that's more military power than 50% of our member species possess combined. The Korthok Empire has been terrorizing this galaxy for 3 centuries. Hainwu replied simply. "A small force might drive them away temporarily, but they would return. We'd prefer permanent solutions." What the council members didn't understand was that humans approached warfare completely differently than other species. Most aliens fought until the enemy retreated, then declared victory. Humans fought until the enemy could never threaten anyone again. On the Busan, Admiral Jiang was reviewing intelligence reports with her senior staff. Captain Dong Haiyan, her intelligence chief, had been studying the Korthok Empire for weeks. The Empire controls 47 star systems, he reported. Their total military strength is estimated at around 5,000 ships, but they're spread across their entire territory. More importantly, 17 of those systems contain enslaved populations from species they've conquered over the years. Admiral Jiang studied the holographic map showing Korthok territory. Red dots marked military installations. Yellow dots showed slave camps and forced labor facilities. Blue dots indicated worlds where entire species lived in bondage.
Ow.
Many enslaved beings are we talking about, Captain? She asked. Conservative estimates suggest over 2 billion sentient beings in various forms of slavery, Admiral. Some have been enslaved for generations. The bridge fell quiet for a moment. Every human officer was thinking the same thing. Their own species had once practiced slavery, and they knew the horror it represented. Begin liberation operations immediately, Admiral Jiang ordered. Task Force Alpha will move on the nearest slave worlds. I want those people freed within the week. The galaxy was about to witness humanity's true nature, not just as warriors, but as liberators. The end of the Korthok Empire didn't happen all at once. It started quietly at the edges of their territory where they thought they were safest. On remote worlds where Korthok overseers had been bullying enslaved populations for decades, something new appeared in the sky: sleek human ships. Dropping out of hyperspace with surgical precision, Emperor Korthtal was having breakfast in his massive palace. When the first reports started coming in. His fortress world of Korth Prime was deep in the heart of Empire territory, surrounded by dozens of military installations. He felt completely safe as he read the morning intelligence briefings. Your Majesty, his communication officer stammered. Rushing into the dining hall, we're receiving distress calls from the Outer Rim worlds. Bashtar Mexalan and Kordesh have all gone silent. Korthel was a massive Korthok, even by his species standards. 12 feet tall, with scars covering his armored hide from centuries of personal combat. He had built this empire through fear and brutality, and he couldn't imagine anyone challenging him successfully. Probably just communication problems, he growled, continuing to eat his meal of raw meat. Send a patrol to check on them. But the reports kept coming. Not just 3 worlds, 7, then 12, then 17. Entire star systems were falling, silent within hours of each other. What made it worse was that these attacks were happening simultaneously across thousands of light years. No species had that kind of reach. Admiral Wolton was Korthel's most experienced commander, a grizzled veteran who had conquered 23 worlds personally. He burst into the Emperor's chambers with panic in his 4 eyes. My Emperor, it's not communication problems. It's the humans. They're everywhere at once. They're hitting our outer territories with perfectly coordinated strikes. Impossible, Korthtal roared. No one has fleets large enough to attack 17 systems simultaneously. Wolton's report painted a terrifying picture. The humans weren't fighting like any species the Korthok had ever encountered. Most enemies attacked one target, fought a battle, then moved on to the next target. It was predictable. You could plan defenses. But humans were different. They had divided their massive fleet into dozens of task forces, each one powerful enough to overwhelm an entire Korthok battle group. These task forces struck simultaneously, using coordination that seemed impossible across such vast distances. They don't just defeat our fleets, my Emperor Wolton explained, his voice shaking. They destroy everything. Our shipyards, our supply depots, our communication relays, our command centers. It's like they studied our entire military structure and know exactly what to hit to cripple us completely. What the Korthok didn't understand was that humans had been studying them for weeks. Every communication they intercepted, every ship movement they observed, every tactical pattern they noticed had been analyzed by human military intelligence. By the time the attack began, humanity knew the Korthok Empire better than the Korthok knew themselves. On the Liberation ship UAS Incheon, Captain Yoonji was coordinating the rescue of enslaved populations with the same precision her species applied to warfare. She was a logistics expert who had spent years planning humanitarian operations on Earth. The cargo bays had been converted into temporary refugee centers. Medical teams treated beings who had been tortured for years. Counselors helped traumatized families begin to process their freedom. Food distribution centers provided proper nutrition to beings who had been deliberately starved. "How do you manage all this so efficiently?" asked Dr. Yeltani. A Zilani physician who had volunteered to help with the refugee operations. Captain Yoonji looked up from her coordination tablets, which were tracking the care of over 50,000 rescued beings across multiple ships. "This is how my species operates, Doctor. When we commit to something, we commit completely. We don't just rescue people, we make sure they have everything they need to rebuild their lives." The rescued beings came from dozens of different species. Some had been enslaved for only a few years. Others had been born into slavery and never known freedom. Human psychologists worked around the clock to help them understand that their nightmare was finally over. The core. Counselor Thresh was the first to speak, his scaled face dark with anger. "Ambassador Hyenwoo, we asked for reasonable military assistance. You destroyed an entire interstellar empire. The Korthok controlled 47 star systems." Hyenwoo stood slowly, his expression neutral. "Counselor Thresh, with respect, you asked for help. We helped." The chamber erupted in angry chatter from dozens of different species. Some delegates were clicking, others were whistling, and a few were making sounds that had no equivalent in human language. But they were all saying the same thing. The human response had been completely excessive. "But the scale of destruction," shouted the Mantari delegate, waving his insect-like arms. "You didn't just drive them away, you eliminated them completely." Admiral Gyeong stood up, her small frame somehow commanding attention from the massive assembly. "Counselor, the Korthok Empire was built on slavery and genocide. They had enslaved over 2 billion sentient beings. Would you have preferred? We left them intact so they could continue their crimes." The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Many species had known about Korthok slavery, but had felt powerless to stop it. They had accepted it as an unfortunate reality of galactic life. The Altarian delegate, a tall, thin being with multiple eyes, spoke up nervously. "But surely there could have been diplomatic solutions? Negotiations? Economic sanctions?" Admiral Giln's expression hardened, and for the first time, the assembled aliens saw a glimpse of the warrior that lurked beneath her calm exterior. "Counselor, my species has a long and painful history with slavery. We learned some hard lessons about what happens when evil is allowed to flourish unchecked because good people choose to look the other way." She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. "We don't negotiate with slavers. We don't impose sanctions on genocidal empires and hope they'll reform. We stop them. Permanently." The silence in the chamber was deafening. Many delegates were realizing for the first time that they had allied with a species that viewed moral issues in absolute terms. Humans didn't see slavery as a regrettable but manageable problem. They saw it as pure evil that had to be eliminated. "Counselor." Yixtel from the Commerce Guild spoke up with obvious fear in his voice. "But Admiral, your military power? It exceeds that of any 50-member species combined. What's to stop you from imposing your will on the rest of us?" Admiral Jiang looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Counselor, we're not conquerors. We're protectors." "There's a difference, but how can we be sure?" pressed another delegate. Because Admiral Gilng replied simply, "If we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we would have done it already instead of liberating enslaved populations and returning them to their homeworlds." Ambassador Hyenwoo stepped forward again. "The question now," he said calmly, "is what comes next. The galaxy is more peaceful today than it was 6 weeks ago. Slave populations are free. Trade routes are safer. Children sleep without fear of Korthok raids." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as possible. "You can fear us if you want. But remember this, we didn't come here to conquer. We came here to help. And we did exactly what you asked us to do. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 6 months after the fall of the Korthok Empire, the galaxy looked completely different. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now safe. Worlds that had lived in constant fear were building new cities. Children of dozens of species were growing up in a universe where slavery was becoming just a terrible memory from the past. The changes weren't just military, they were everywhere. The Galactic Council had quietly voted to make humanity their official military response force. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but everyone understood that when serious threats emerged, they would call the humans. The vote had passed with very little debate, though many delegates had looked nervous as they cast their ballots. President Yelani had insisted on visiting Earth personally to thank humanity for saving her people. She stood now in Sol's Memorial Park, a peaceful place filled with flowering trees and quiet walking paths. The park honored humans who had died fighting against injustice throughout their history. Soldiers who had fought against slavery, civilians who had resisted oppression, peacekeepers who had given their lives protecting others. Ambassador Hyanwu, she said softly, her flower-like features peaceful for the first time in years. I need you to understand something. Your people didn't just save the Zilani from extinction. You made sure we'll never have to face that kind of terror again. Hyanwu nodded, watching children play near a fountain dedicated to human peacekeepers. That's how my species approaches problems, President Yelani. We don't believe in temporary solutions. When we fix something, we fix it permanently. Across the galaxy, the results of that philosophy were visible everywhere. Former slave worlds were rebuilding with human assistance, not just military protection, but engineers helping design new cities, doctors training local medical staff, and teachers helping traumatized children learn to read and dream again on the bridge of the UES Busan. Admiral Gyung monitored patrol reports from across Council space. Her fleets had spread out to cover the major trade routes, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Piracy had dropped to almost zero. Worlds that had been isolated by fear were now actively trading with their neighbors. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving another request for assistance. The Vegan Commerce Guild is asking for escort ships for their merchant convoys. Admiral Gildong smiled. Approved. Signed Patrol Group 7 to escort duty. It had become routine. Now, species that had once been suspicious of human intentions were actively requesting their protection. The galaxy had learned that, while humans were indeed dangerous, they were only dangerous to those who threatened innocent lives in the council chambers. The political landscape had shifted dramatically. Species who had once dismissed humans as violent newcomers were now competing to offer them trade deals and alliance agreements. The humans, for their part, remained focused on their self-appointed role as galactic protectors. Counselor Thresh sat in his private office, reviewing reports. With his aide. You know, he said thoughtfully, we asked them for help with a single problem. One dying species being threatened by one empire. His aide, a younger member of his species, nodded. And they helped, sir. They solved the problem completely.
Thresh
Laughed, not with humor, but with a kind of amazed recognition. They gave us exactly what we asked for. We just never understood what human help actually looked like. The reports on his desk told the story clearly. Crime rates across council space were at historic lows. Trade was flourishing. New worlds were joining the council every month, drawn by the promise of human protection. Several species that had been considered extinct were rebuilding their civilizations on worlds liberated from core thought control. We wanted someone to help one species, Thresh continued. They helped everyone. We wanted someone to drive away one threat. It eliminated the concept of that kind of threat existing in the first place. His aide looked puzzled. Is that bad, sir? Thresh considered the question seriously. No, he said finally. It's just ... very human. They don't think small. When they commit to something, they commit completely. The lesson was spreading throughout the galaxy now, shared in whispered conversations and official diplomatic briefings. Alike, when you ask humans for help, be very specific about what you want, because you're going to get exactly what you ask for, plus everything else they think you need. Whether you knew you needed it or not, the galaxy was learning that sometimes. That was exactly what everyone had been hoping for all along.